It all started when I was 17. My relationship with my dad was complicated, to say the least. He'd remarried after my parents' messy divorce, and my stepmom, along with her daughter Tiffany, who was a couple of years older than me, made it their mission to make my life a living hell. Tiffany, especially, seemed to have an innate dislike for me. I never understood why. I mostly kept to myself, especially after realizing that no one in that house actually cared about me. My cat, Mittens, was my only solace. I'd had him since I was 3, and he was the one constant through all the upheaval of my childhood. But then, he died. I was devastated, a complete mess for weeks. Of course, Tiffany and her mom used that as ammunition against me, claiming I was being dramatic and attention-seeking. My dad, ever the peacekeeper, or maybe just conflict avoidant, never defended me. One day, I came home from school to find the house in an uproar. My dad was furious. My stepmom was shooting me icy glares, and Tiffany, well, she was putting on an Oscar-worthy performance of innocence. It turned out my dad's prized possession, an incredibly expensive watch, was missing. And guess who they blamed? Yep, me. My stepmom claimed I'd been acting strangely, grieving for my cat apparently, and Tiffany, the ever-helpful witness, swore she'd seen me lurking around my dad's room. I was blindsided. I hadn't even known the watch was gone, let alone had anything to do with its disappearance. My protests fell on deaf ears. My dad, convinced I was just like my crazy mom, exploded. He called me a liar, a thief, and then he kicked me out. Just like that, at 17, I was homeless. With nowhere else to go, I ended up at my mom's. It wasn't ideal. She wasn't exactly the most stable person, and her need for constant attention was draining. But at least I had a roof over my head. For the next 4 years, I tried to move on. I focused on school, graduated high school, even managed to get through college. But the pain of my dad's betrayal, of his complete lack of trust, never really faded. Those first few months after being kicked out were a blur. I felt lost, adrift. My mom, bless her heart, tried to be supportive, but her own struggles made it hard for her to be the kind of anchor I needed. I threw myself into school, anything to keep my mind occupied and off the gaping hole where my family used to be. It wasn't easy. I missed my dad terribly. Even though our relationship had been strained, he was still my dad. I craved his approval, his love. I sent him texts, left voicemails, even tried reaching out through other family members. Nothing. Silence. It was like I'd been erased from his life. The silence hurt more than the accusations, more than being kicked out. It confirmed what I'd always feared, that I was expendable, that my place in his life was conditional, easily revoked. But life, as it always does, went on. I graduated high school, then college, with my mom cheering me on the whole way. Each accomplishment felt bittersweet, a reminder of my dad's absence. I started building a life for myself, a life where I didn't need his approval, where I could define my own worth. 4 years passed. 4 years of silence, of slowly rebuilding myself from the wreckage of that night. The pain dulled, but the scar remained, a constant reminder of the family I'd lost. Then, out of the blue, an invitation arrived. My grandpa's 75th birthday party. He was a good man, my grandpa. He'd always been there for me, a steady presence in the storm of my childhood. He'd even helped me out financially when I was first kicked out, despite living on a fixed income in a retirement home. I hesitated. I knew my dad, stepmom, and Tiffany would be there. The thought of facing them after all this time churned my stomach. But my grandpa? He was my rock. I couldn't miss his birthday. So, I went. The farmhouse was buzzing with the warmth of family and friends. I tried to blend in, to focus on the joy of the occasion, but the tension was a living thing, coiling around me every time my gaze drifted towards my dad, his wife, and Tiffany. They were a picture of familial bliss, a constant reminder of what I'd lost. I kept my distance, mostly chatting with cousins and distant relatives, anyone to avoid the inevitable awkward encounter. Tiffany didn't even acknowledge my existence, and my stepmom, well, She wore that smug smile that always made me feel like an unwelcome guest in my own life. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, my grandpa stood up. The room fell silent. He began his toast, thanking everyone for coming, reminiscing about his life and the people who'd made it special. Then, he paused, his eyes twinkling with a mischievous glint. "Now," he said, his voice ringing clear, "there's a little matter I need to address." My heart skipped a beat. I had a feeling this wasn't going to be your typical birthday toast. He started talking about the watch, the one that had cost me my family. He'd recently learned what had truly happened to it, he said. It had been stolen. By Tiffany. The room went still. I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. My grandpa went on to explain how he'd discovered the truth through an old friend who owned a pawn shop. Tiffany, in her desperation to sell the watch, had confessed everything to the pawnbroker, the car accident she'd caused while drinking, her plan to have her mom concoct a story to cover her tracks. My blood ran cold. All those years, the pain, the rejection, all because of her lies. And my dad. He'd believed them without a second thought. Grandpa finished his toast, the silence in the room heavy with shock and disbelief. My dad's face was ashen. Tiffany looked like a deer caught in headlights. And my stepmom? Well, she looked like she'd just swallowed a lemon. I couldn't stay. I needed to get out, to breathe, to process the tidal wave of emotions crashing over me. I slipped out of the farmhouse, leaving behind the wreckage of their perfect little family. I walked for what felt like hours, the crisp autumn air a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. Vindication battled with sadness, anger with a strange sense of emptiness. 4 years I'd waited for the truth to come out, and now that it had, I didn't feel the relief I'd expected. Instead, a hollow ache settled in my chest. The next morning, Grandpa showed up at my doorstep, his brow furrowed with worry. He was afraid he'd overstepped, that his dramatic reveal had caused more harm than good. I reassured him, telling him I was grateful, that he'd done what no one else had. He'd believed me. He understood, he said, his eyes filled with a grandfatherly love that warmed me to my core. He told me to take my time, to not rush into any decisions about my dad. "No matter what happens," he said, squeezing my hand, "I've got your back." And then came the onslaught. My phone blew up with texts and voicemails from my dad. At first, they were filled with apologies, with pleas for forgiveness. He wanted to make things right, he said. He'd been wrong, blinded by... Well, he didn't quite say it, but the implication was clear. Blinded by his wife and stepdaughter. A flicker of hope ignited within me. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for reconciliation, for the father-daughter relationship I'd always longed for. But the apologies soon soured. He started talking about how hard it had been for him, how he'd been under so much pressure. Then came the accusations. I'd manipulated Grandpa, turned him against his own son. The old familiar anger surged through me. He still didn't trust me, still saw me as the villain in his carefully constructed narrative. I agreed to meet him, hoping against hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd finally see the truth. We met at a cafe we used to frequent when I was younger, a place filled with bittersweet memories. He looked older, wearier, but the same nervous energy that had always characterized him buzzed beneath the surface. He started with another apology, acknowledging his mistakes, expressing his regret. For a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to believe that things could be different, that we could rebuild what had been broken. But then, the excuses started. He'd been stressed. He hadn't known what to believe. They'd tricked him. He even had the audacity to suggest I should forgive Tiffany and her mom, because family is family. That's when I knew. He wasn't truly sorry for what he'd done. He was sorry he'd been caught, sorry for the embarrassment, sorry for the disruption to his comfortable life. He wasn't ready to take responsibility, to acknowledge the pain he'd caused. I left the cafe feeling a strange mix of relief and despair. Relief that the charade was over. Despair that my father was still more concerned with appearances than with his own daughter. And then, the whispers started. Tiffany and her mom, not content with ruining my life once, were busy spinning a new narrative. I was the problem, they said. Overreacting, isolating myself, turning the family against them. I was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of being hurt by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. I decided to cut them all off. My dad, Tiffany, her mom, all of them. I needed to protect myself, to finally heal from the wounds they'd inflicted. The world felt strangely quiet after I cut ties with my dad. It was a lonely quiet, but also a peaceful one. I focused on my own life, my job, my friends. The constant anxiety that had been my companion for so long slowly began to recede. But the story wasn't over, not yet. A few weeks later, Grandpa called. He wanted to see me, he said, had something important to discuss. Intrigued, I went to visit him at his retirement home. He looked serious, a crease of worry etched between his brows. "I've been doing some digging," he began, his voice low. "And what I found, well, it's not good." He'd been suspicious of Tiffany and her mom for a while, he explained. After the watch incident, he'd started looking into their finances, and what he uncovered was shocking. They'd been systematically siphoning money from the family business, from my dad's personal accounts, even taking out loans in his name. They'd been living a life of luxury at his expense, racking up debt that he was completely unaware of. It turned out Tiffany, in her arrogance, had left a trail of careless spending. Grandpa, with his old-fashioned accounting methods, had easily spotted the discrepancies. The spa treatments, the designer clothes, all charged to the company account. He'd confronted them, of course, but they'd denied everything, spun some elaborate tale about misunderstandings and accidental charges. Grandpa, however, wasn't fooled. He'd seen enough. He went to his lawyer and did the unthinkable. He disinherited my dad. Everything that was supposed to go to my dad, the company shares, the trust funds, the properties, was redirected. A significant portion was even left to me. "Your father," Grandpa explained, his voice heavy with disappointment, "has shown he's not responsible enough to handle the family legacy. He chose them over you, over his own blood." But Grandpa didn't stop there. He also made sure Tiffany and her mom couldn't access a single penny of the family fortune. He froze their accounts, blocked them from any trusts, and even forced the sale of the house they were living in. It turned out Grandpa owned the property, and my dad was essentially living there on his good graces. The news hit Tiffany and her mom like a thunderbolt. Their world, built on lies and deceit, came crashing down around them. Tiffany, in a desperate attempt to salvage her lavish lifestyle, even had the nerve to reach out to me, begging for money. I scoffed. She'd thrown me to the wolves when I was 17, and now she expected my help? I sent her a short, curt message, telling her to deal with the consequences of her actions. I felt no pity. She'd made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. My dad, meanwhile, was a wreck. He called, he texted, he pleaded, but his apologies were still laced with blame, with a refusal to acknowledge his own role in the whole mess. I told him I wouldn't have a relationship with him until he was ready to take full responsibility for his actions. Until then, I was done. The whole situation was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, sadness, a strange sense of satisfaction that justice had finally been served. But mostly, I felt a profound sense of weariness. I was tired of the drama, tired of the constant betrayals. All I wanted was to move on, to build a life free from the toxicity of my family. The fallout from Grandpa's actions was swift and brutal. My stepmom, faced with the sudden loss of her luxurious lifestyle, completely unraveled. She threw tantrums, threatened lawsuits, and even tried to guilt-trip my dad into fighting back against his own father. But it was all for naught. Grandpa had planned meticulously, leaving no room for legal challenges. Tiffany, stripped of her access to endless funds, was forced to confront the reality of her situation. No more shopping sprees, no more fancy vacations, no more living off someone else's dime. It was a harsh lesson, but a necessary one. Perhaps, just perhaps, this would be the wake-up call she needed to finally grow up and take responsibility for her own life. As for my dad, well, he was a shadow of his former self. He'd lost everything, his inheritance, his house, and even his wife. Stepmom, realizing that he was no longer of any financial use to her, filed for divorce. It was a cold, calculated move, but not entirely unexpected. She'd always been more interested in his money than in him. My dad was left with nothing but the consequences of his choices. He continued to call and text, but his messages were filled with bitterness and self-pity. He still couldn't see the truth, still clung to the belief that he was the victim in all of this. Until he was ready to face his own mistakes, to acknowledge the pain he'd caused, I knew there was no point in rekindling our relationship. Grandpa, on the other hand, was thriving. He'd always been a strong, independent man, and this whole ordeal seemed to have energized him. He was like a force of nature, determined to protect his family and right the wrongs that had been committed. He became my rock, my confidant, the father figure I'd always longed for. We talked about the future, about my plans, my dreams. He made it clear that he wanted to take care of me, to ensure that I had the opportunities I'd been denied for so long. His love and support were a balm to my wounded spirit, a reminder that family wasn't just about blood, but about the people who truly cared. Life slowly started to return to normal, or at least a new kind of normal. The constant drama faded, replaced by a sense of peace and stability. I focused on my career, built strong friendships, and even started dating again. The past was still there, a scar that would always remind me of what I'd endured, but it no longer defined me. I learned a lot through this whole ordeal. I learned about betrayal, about forgiveness, about the resilience of the human spirit, but most importantly, I learned the true meaning of family. Family wasn't about shared genes or last names. It was about the people who stood by you, who loved you unconditionally, who believed in you even when you didn't believe in yourself. And in the end, that's what mattered most. I had Grandpa, I had my friends, and I had myself. And that was enough. The future was uncertain, but I faced it with a newfound strength, knowing that I could overcome anything life threw my way. The storm had passed, and I was finally ready to embrace the sunshine. Story 2. Mom and Sis took my vehicle. After my dad died, I worked 3 jobs to support them, ignored my calls, and left a message on the fridge. I moved out after taking everything I had purchased. My younger sister, Kiki, is older than me, and I am the oldest sibling in my family. Since my dad's death, I have been the one providing for my family financially. For background, Dad died in a hit-and-run accident 4 years ago. When the ambulance eventually showed up, he was pronounced dead at the spot since it was too late for him. Even worse, the individual who killed him was never apprehended, leaving us all feeling deeply saddened and frustrated that justice was never done. We struggled to make ends meet following Dad's death because he was the only one in the family making money at the time. I started seeking for work right away because I was about to graduate from college. Fortunately, I was fortunate to get a steady work immediately following college. I told my mom that I would take care of everything because she had never worked outside the home before and was having a terrible time finding a job, especially at her time of grief. Even though I was grieving, I realized I needed to go back to helping my family right away. Thus, from a very young age, I was responsible for all household duties like this. My pay was initially more than sufficient to keep me afloat. My sister and mother, however, as their expenditures increased over time, I realized that it would require more than just a typical 9-to-5 work to support Kiki, pay home bills, and assist my mom. In order to alleviate the financial burden on our family, I have taken on other part-time jobs and worked overtime at my employment. I haven't taken a day off from work or gotten enough sleep since I can't afford to do either. Because of this, there have been days when I feel completely worn out, but I keep going because I know that my family depends on me. It's been difficult, and sometimes I question how long I can maintain this level of speed. But with time, realizing that I'm supporting my family without my father has become both a motivator and a responsibility. My youngest sister, on the other hand, is my total opposite and doesn't help out around the house. Kiki teaches spirituality, a profession that, although fulfilling in its own right, does not significantly increase our family's income or provide financial support. Although I wish to express my admiration for her enthusiasm and dedication to her profession, the truth is that her efforts fall short of meeting our basic need. The few clients she does have pay her very little, and she doesn't have many. I've attempted to modify her professional path by talking to her about it, but she says she's meant to be a spiritual teacher. She keeps asking me for whatever money she needs in the interim. We have frequently argued as a result of our divergent viewpoints and roles. When my sister was younger, I had no problem lending a hand, but now that she is older and an adult, I expected her to take charge and at least put the money I was providing her to better use. For instance, Kiki insists on only purchasing upscale organic items, opting to only shop at a pricey organic store with costs that are almost double those of a typical grocery store. Even while I support healthy living, I don't think it's fair for her to make these decisions at my expense, especially when there are less expensive options that wouldn't put as much strain on my finances. Furthermore, Kiki is insistent about obtaining regular cosmetic treatments, such as manicures, which she gets nearly every other week. She will even insist that I give her $300 or more for these procedures, and occasionally she will also want hair treatments. Kiki says that as her elder sister, I should support her as much as possible, rather than attempting to control her whenever I try to assert my authority and claim that I can't continue to support her lifestyle. She would then vent her resentment on her mother if I didn't give her any more money. She will shout at me, gripe to her mother, and occasionally even take the money I give her out of her bag. This therefore places Mom in a challenging situation, frequently leaving her without enough money to purchase the things she needs. At that point, Mom needs to approach me to request further funds. In the end, I bear the weight for everyone. Our mother, who understands both sides of the issue, has made many attempts to speak with Kiki. She has tactfully advised Kiki to get a reliable job, or at the very least, try to help out financially, even if it's only part-time, if she wishes to carry on with her spiritual activities. However, Kiki hasn't changed her strategy or showed any inclination to do so in spite of these discussions. The tension in our family has only increased as a result of her insistence on leading a lifestyle that is out of step with reality, and I am now mostly responsible for bearing this weight alone. Now, to the newest event, and the reason I'm on Reddit today. Kiki had been seeing this man who, according on my observations, was never the most trustworthy or dependable person. Although he never actually officially acknowledged my sister as his lover, he essentially enjoys playing along with her. In addition, he frequently spent time with several other women behind Kiki's back. My sister eventually caught him in the act with one of his alleged pals, as she went up to him. He refused to apologize and maintained that he had done nothing wrong. Their dispute grew heated as a consequence, and soon it turned violent. Feeling misled and extremely wounded, Kiki ended up striking him in the face and threatening to damage him and any other women he was seeing by putting some of his belongings around the room. When the neighbors heard the chaos, they phoned the police since things had gotten out of hand. Upon their arrival, the authorities discovered that Kiki had physically attacked him, causing serious harm. As a result, she was taken into custody. Since this was her first offense, the cops agreed to let her go with caution, and fortunately, the man agreed not to file any charges. I reasoned that experiencing something so extreme could at least cause her to consider what she did and perhaps make a positive change. But instead of showing regret or admitting the pain she'd caused everyone, Kiki remained completely unrepentant. She firmly believed that she had made the correct decision. She publicly said that she had no qualms about the way she had handled the matter, believing that her actions were appropriate given the situation. Kiki hasn't taken initiative or made an effort to move on after her breakup. Instead, she has sulked about the home and used the split as an excuse to avoid taking on any kind of duty. Her irresponsible lifestyle has become worse. She usually goes out with her buddies to different bars and returns late at night, usually intoxicated. She invites people she doesn't know home, in an attempt to assist her see the damage she's causing to herself and the upheaval she's causing in our life. I've tried talking to her. She just doesn't listen though, dismissing my worries as though I'm the one going overboard. My mother drew me aside this week to discuss Kiki. Mom and I were free to discuss my sister because she was out at the time. Mom began telling me that she had lately learned that Kiki had been doing drugs and that she was beginning to feel truly worried about her. I was shocked to learn that my sister had begun using drugs since I had assumed that she only ever smoked marijuana or got drunk. It also explained why my sister had been requesting more and more money from me each week. Mom kept saying that she was worried that Kiki's self-destructive behavior would get any worse, and that we should step in and help her before it got any worse. I concurred and said that perhaps Kiki needed some expert assistance. Maybe we should investigate counseling, therapy, or even a rehab facility. Someone who may perhaps connect with her in ways that we haven't been able to. Ultimately, it appears that no amount of talking is helping, and all of our attempts to get in touch with her have resulted in disputes or contemptuous reactions. My mother countered that she didn't want a stranger to be in charge of her daughter's care. She firmly believed that it was our duty as her family to help Kiki however we could. Then, to my amazement, she revealed that she had done independent research after learning of my sister's drug usage and had discovered the ideal upscale health resort where she believed she could spend a week with Kiki. Mom thought that by allowing each participant to bring a partner, this retreat would allow her to spend meaningful time with Kiki in a therapeutic environment. The notion shocked me, not only because it didn't seem essential, but also because I couldn't see how we could pay for it with my salary. There is rarely any money left over after paying all of our bills and family costs, so taking a luxurious vacation was out of the question. The idea of spending for a week at a posh health resort seemed completely unfeasible, since we couldn't even afford to dine at a small restaurant. Mom gently reminded me that she knew I had been saving for a used car for months when I asked how we were going to pay for this. Then she said maybe I could send her and Kiki to the retreat with that money instead. I felt a mix of shock and frustration. I've been diligently setting aside money for this car because it was essential for my daily routine. Having a car would significantly cut down on my current nearly 3-hour commute each way. I needed a car to help me better manage my time and lessen the fatigue that comes with my lengthy commute. Besides, I wasn't the only one involved. We would all gain from owning a car since it would enable us to reduce the expenses and annoyances associated with public transport. We rely on Uber and other services. I gave my mother an explanation, emphasizing that this car was an investment in our stability going forward and would eventually benefit our entire family. I therefore informed her that I would not part with my hard-earned savings for my sister. Mom, however, insisted that we couldn't just watch helplessly as Kiki needed this experience more than I needed the car. She said she was terrified of losing another loved one, particularly after Dad's death, and she was sure that Kiki could change after going on a retreat. Finding a local counselor or therapist who could regularly work with Kiki to address her emotional and mental health would be a more sensible option, I told my mom. In this manner, we wouldn't have to shell out so much money for a retreat where Kiki might wind up just unwinding instead of dealing with the problems she needs to solve. I promised Mom that by the end of the week, I would look into my options and locate a trustworthy counselor for Kiki. I advised to Mom that all she needed to do was have a heart-to-heart chat with Kiki and just urge my sister to give therapy a try, as Kiki generally rejected my advice. My mom didn't quarrel much with me after that, so I believed she had finally come around to understand my point of view. As you can imagine, I was completely shocked and furious to find the house eerily empty when I returned home from work last night. Mom is usually reading one of her books or watching TV when I walk in. I yelled for Mom and Kiki, expecting them to appear from somewhere, but the house was deserted. No answer, no one in sight. I assumed they might be out shopping for groceries or something. As I entered the kitchen, I saw a note in my mother's recognizable handwriting taped to the refrigerator. I took it out of the refrigerator and read her message. "We apologize for not waiting for you. I'm traveling to the opulent retreat with Kiki. Since money can always be earned back, I understand that you will be upset, but the most important thing is your sister's mental health. Next week, we'll see you." Unable to comprehend what I was reading, I stood there looking at the note. I rushed to my computer and logged into my bank account, overcome with shock and anxiety. Mom had access to my bank account, and as I looked at my balance, a feeling of shock washed over me. Mom had withdrawn all the savings I had. Every dollar I had carefully put aside for months was completely drained. The fact that my own mother could do something so vile to me left me feeling both betrayed and helpless. I couldn't hold back the tears. I just sat there staring at the screen, sobbing in disbelief and frustration. How could she take the money? I had worked so hard to save money that was supposed to help me make my life easier and use it to fund a luxury retreat with my ungrateful sister. All I could see was that simple note on the fridge saying money can always be earned back. How could she say that, though? When I was the only one actually earning anything around the house, Mom didn't work. Kiki didn't contribute. I was the one sacrificing my time, my energy, and my future, all to keep us afloat. And now, after everything, they'd taken my hard-earned money for a getaway I never agreed to, leaving me to bear the full weight of responsibility. Since then, I've left Mom several angry voicemails trying to make her understand just how deeply she hurt me. But she hasn't answered a single call, choosing instead to ignore my attempts to reach her. She knows I'm upset, and yet has decided to avoid confronting the situation. As for Kiki, the only response I've gotten from her was a single infuriating text, a winky emoji, a wink. No apology, no explanation, just a smug little emoji, as if to say she couldn't care less about the pain I feel. This whole situation has left me feeling betrayed, unsupported, and utterly alone in a family I've done nothing but sacrifice for. I am so angry. Credit Aita for being pissed at my mom and sister for doing this to me. Am I overreacting? Update 1. Thank you to everyone for your comments. It has really made me think. I completely agree. My mom and sister have been taking advantage of my willingness to step up. Let me explain, please. When Dad passed away, I was devastated. In that grief, I felt this immense responsibility to take care of our family. I was the only one who had a job, and somehow I convinced myself that it was my duty to make sure we were okay financially, even if it meant taking on more than my fair share. It was almost as if I believed that providing for them would somehow fill the void that Dad's absence left. At the time, I was so focused on keeping us all afloat that I didn't notice how little effort they were putting in to support me or themselves. But now, after everything that's happened, it's become painfully clear that things have gone way too far. Losing my savings like this has been a real wake-up call, and it's made me realize that I've been taken for granted. Mom and Kiki seem to assume I'll always be there to pick up the pieces. But what about my own life? I'm working myself to the bone while they continue to live without contributing financially, or even showing gratitude for my sacrifices. To everyone telling me to report my mom to the police. I don't want to do that as much as I am angry and disappointed in her. I don't want her to end up in jail. Instead, I've decided to give her an even harsher consequence by moving out of the house. I could have done this years ago, but I stayed with Mom and Kiki all these years because I felt they needed me. If I weren't shouldering the burden of their expenses, I could actually have a stable, financially secure life. I could use my money to live comfortably, maybe even invest in things I enjoy, or build a future for myself. It's hard to admit, but I'm starting to realize that my loyalty to my family has cost me my own happiness. I have a lot to think about for tonight. Update 2. It's been a week since my last update, thanks to all of your strong suggestions and support. The first thing I did was begin packing up my things from around the house. I made a point of gathering everything I bought over the years: kitchen appliances, dishes, home decor, and the countless other items that I had purchased to make our home functional and comfortable. I then reached out to a close friend who graciously offered to let me stay with her temporarily while I searched for an apartment of my own. I made sure to leave long before Mom and Kiki returned, leaving not a single note or explanation behind. I knew any conversation about my departure would fall on deaf ears, and I wanted them to truly feel the weight of my absence without any warning. Sure enough, the moment they arrived back and found the house stripped of everything I'd ever contributed, they began calling me repeatedly. My phone was soon flooded with voicemails from Mom asking where I was and what had happened to all the things in the house. The irony was almost laughable. Only now, when they were faced with an empty house and no one to rely on, did they start reaching out in desperation. Now they were the ones left without answers. After letting them stew for a few hours, I called Mom back. When she picked up, she told me that she had me on speakerphone and Kiki was next to her. Both of them wanted to know why I had disappeared. Mom told me she knew I was upset about her taking my money and tried to justify it by saying that Kiki was feeling much better after her mini vacation. She insisted that I shouldn't still be upset about it. I just kept my composure and informed Mom that I had moved out for good, and now they were on their own. Immediately, Mom and Kiki demanded to know why I'd done something like this. Mom started to say that I should have talked with her before leaving the house like that. I reminded her that she and Kiki had gone behind my back, taking every cent of my savings without so much as a heads up, and spent it on themselves without even waiting for the chance to talk it over with me. They had ignored my calls all week, avoiding any attempt at accountability until now, when they returned to find themselves without my financial support. I told them that I was done supporting them. They had made their choices, and now they could handle the consequences if they truly wanted to be on their own. They were welcome to it. I wasn't coming back. That was when Mom began pleading, saying that I couldn't just leave them like this, and that she was now willing to sit down and talk things over with me. But Kiki, still in the background, was shouting louder than ever, demanding to know why I was punishing them by starving them and leaving them behind when all they had done was just take a well-deserved break. She even accused me of being selfish. Mom argued that half the kitchen appliances were gone and that there was barely any food left in the house. She tried to guilt me, saying while she understood my frustration, she was frustrated with my overreaction. She said that I was throwing a tantrum for no reason and urged me to calm down and come back home. But for the first time, I felt no pull of guilt, no desire to smooth things over or run back to fix everything. Instead, I knew I was done, and that realization felt freeing. This was no tantrum. It was me finally standing up for myself, setting boundaries that had been overlooked for far too long. When Mom suggested that if I returned, she would never make the same mistake again, I simply laughed at her. I told her flat out that I couldn't care less if she ever did something like this again. I had already taken steps to protect myself. I had removed her access to my bank account. I also wasn't going to send them any more money or bail them out. They were on their own now. I told her they still had the house Dad paid for, and if they really wanted to stay afloat, they needed to find jobs immediately and start taking responsibility. Kiki, of course, screamed and demanded to know what they were supposed to do in the meantime, how they were going to survive without food and no money. Mom, angry and desperate, started yelling at me too, calling me selfish and stubborn-headed. But I wasn't fazed. I'd heard all the guilt trips before. I simply ignored their screaming and ended the call, blocking both of them from contacting me again. I can't lie, it felt incredibly satisfying after all those years of putting myself second and giving everything for them. I was finally standing up for myself. I know this will be a tough lesson for them, but they need to understand the consequences of exploiting me and taking advantage of my hard work. Since that conversation, there's been no contact from my family, mainly because I have blocked them from my contacts and social media. Also, for the first time in a long time, I'm living my life on my own terms, and it feels like a weight has been lifted. Update 3 for everyone who's worried about my mom or sister showing up at my job. Don't worry, I've already informed my boss about the situation, and a few of my colleagues are aware of how crazy and irrational both my mom and sister are. It's safe to say that everyone has been very sympathetic and supportive about what I've been through. If Kiki does show up at my workplace to harass me, well, it would only give me a reason to file a police complaint against her. That definitely wouldn't be good for her record. So I sincerely hope for her sake that she doesn't cross that line. As for how my mom and Kiki are going to survive with no food or money, honestly, I don't know. And at this point, I really don't care. Perhaps there's still a bit of the money they took from me left after all their spending on the retreat. Or maybe they'll find a way to make do. They're adults and they have a house, so it's not like they're completely without resources. Maybe they'll manage to find jobs soon, or even reach out to other family members for help. At this point, I'm done being the one to pick up the pieces for them. I've spent years looking after them, sacrificing my own well-being. This is their turn to figure things out on their own. I've made my choice and I'm moving forward with my life. Update 4. Wow. It's been 6 months since my last update. I continue to receive DMs from people asking how I'm doing, so I'm finally here on Reddit to give an update. My life has been going great lately. I've finally moved into my own place after saving money for months while living with my friend. It's not a big space, but it's mine, and that's all that matters right now. Now that I have a space of my own, I have started to save for a car just like I had always dreamt about. As for any updates regarding my mom and Kiki, they did try to reach out to me a few months ago. They showed up at my office one late evening. I'll admit, seeing them there shook me a little. My mom looked absolutely exhausted. Her eyes were sunken and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. It was clear she had been going through a lot. She ran straight into my arms and started crying, pleading with me to come back home with them. I wanted to feel sympathy for her, but I stayed firm. I told her no, and I couldn't go back to that environment. Hearing this, my mom continued to cry like she couldn't even fathom what I was saying. Kiki, of course, immediately started blaming me for abandoning them and told me how difficult their life has been. As if all of this was somehow my fault, she insisted that I needed to stop playing around and come back home, since they had already learned their lesson. Kiki even claimed she was now ready to find a job and earn proper money, just like I had wanted her to do. Mom then tried to pull the emotional card, saying Dad would be disappointed in me for abandoning them and that he would have wanted us to stick together. I replied calmly but firmly that I believed Dad would actually be proud of me for cutting my losses and walking away. I wasn't going to let them drag me down anymore. I told them how much better my life had become without them, without constantly being asked for money or to rescue them from their own choices. I continued to tell them it was wrong for them to just show up outside my office like this, without any respect for my boundaries. I had explicitly cut them off, so this was not okay. They couldn't force me to go back home with them when I didn't want to. I warned them that if they did something like this again, I would call the cops. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me back into a situation where I was being taken for granted. In the end, she and Mom left begrudgingly, but even while going, Kiki begged me to give her a few $100s for the last time, but I refused. That was the last time I saw them in person. After that encounter, there's been no further contact from them. Since then, I've heard through a few friends from my old neighborhood that Kiki still hasn't found a proper job, while Mom is the one working at a local diner and bringing in all the money. It breaks my heart, honestly, that my sister is so cruel to make our poor mother work for her. Also, Kiki has made her current boyfriend move in with them. Apparently, this guy does have a job and isn't exactly like a freeloader, so I guess he's helping out with things. If he's providing support, at least they have some stability now. Anyway, this will be my final update about my family. I've put in a lot of effort to heal and move forward after leaving home, so I'm going to choose to not discuss about them any further. Story 3. His parents want me to raise the twin sons that resulted from his husband's affair with a 20-year-old, when a vehicle accident claimed their lives. Hi there, everyone. A 20-year-old girl and my 45-year-old husband, 49-year-old of 23 years, have been having an affair since 2020. When his affair partner gave birth to twin sons in March of this year, I learnt about it. We were going to get divorced, of course. Since then, we have been working things out. The procedure has taken a long time. We required an accountant since he utilized the shared account for his affair, and we had various properties in common. When my husband and the woman he cheated with died in a vehicle accident, it finally seemed like the end was near. Fortunately, the twins were unharmed in the collision. Since neither set of grandparents can permanently adopt them, they are now orphans. Both of my husband's parents reside in assisted care facilities. He doesn't have any siblings, therefore the only solution is to steal them. Refuses. She has never had children in her life. On the side of the woman, her parents are likewise unable to be active in the long run, but I'm not really sure of the specifics. What about the one sister? Since we were still married, she has lived abroad, and he hasn't kept up. I and our 2 kids will inherit all of his assets. I'm not that heartless as to abandon those infants. I thus consented to give the remaining amount in the joint account to whoever is their legal guardian. The savings came to almost £25,000. The problem is that nobody wants to adopt them. My in-laws are now putting pressure on me to adopt and raise them. The problem is that I absolutely do not want to. I know that a significant portion of me will always have some sort of animosity towards them, even if I wouldn't adore them or want to be the bad stepmother. I'll probably give preference to my own kids. I genuinely loved my husband and believed that we were happy until I learnt about the affair, but it's not their fault. Our 2 girls are 16 and 14 years old. We obviously disagreed, but we've never insulted one another. After I learnt about the affair, he started berating me and accusing me of being unfaithful. He became violent and even attempted to evict me from the house where I grew up, which is not shared. Just so you know, I'm also parenting teens by myself these days. I no longer have the stamina to raise children. My girls despise their younger siblings. During our divorce, I attempted to persuade them to spend time with their father, but they refused. There was no way to sugarcoat the matter because the babies were the ones who discovered it all, and they are also too old to get away with it. The majority of my acquaintances concur that my in-laws, not me, should be in charge of those kids. My mother and the affair woman's parents want me to raise them. It's painful to not have my mom's support, even though I know she's only suffering from grandchildren fever. The boys will be placed in foster care if I don't make a choice by next week. They are currently staying with their maternal grandparents for the time being. I feel terrible, but if I don't take them in, I'm certain I won't be able to take them in the winter. A minor update. Hello everyone. I appreciate the best wishes for my children, the guys and myself. This has gone far further than I anticipated. In addition, a lot of kind people offered to look into providing a decent home for the twins. Even though I'm not their mother, it still makes me happy to know that there are decent people in the world. I intend to talk with the grandparents tomorrow and decline to assume legal guardianship of the boys after giving it some serious thought, consulting with my lawyer, reading the comments, conducting research, etc. My girls come first, but I will provide the usernames of those who ask to meet for private adoptions or foster care. The twins' grandparents will have the last say over whether to adopt them, retain them, or give them over to the state. I wish I had the mental capacity to accomplish this, but I need to give my whole focus to my two children, who are going through a lot. In order to properly determine if the lads have any inheritance claims, I will also be speaking with the attorneys. If they do, I'll step aside and let the attorneys take care of whatever it takes to get access when it's most convenient. I'll make sure they have access to the $25,000 if they don't. From day one, I was going to give them. I'll stop there. Even if I may have a biased moral compass, I don't think I have any legal or moral obligations to go beyond what the law requires. I shouldn't have to help everyone, and I can't. 2 of my daughters require treatment after losing their father. 2 females are on the verge of attending college. They've endured enough without witnessing their mother show preference for their father's mistress's kids. 1 update. Hi everyone. I went to talk to the twins' grandparents yesterday, as I said 2 nights ago. I gave an explanation of my stance and declined to assume the boys' guardianship. When I stated it to my mother-in-law, she nearly smacked me. Fortunately, though, my father-in-law stopped her, and everything was done in a public setting. The maternal grandparents begged me repeatedly to raise them because they feared losing them. When they accused me of being selfish, I lost it because I kept saying no. They and their son and daughter were the only self-centered individuals in this mess, I informed them directly. My husband, their son, cheated and caused the divorce. Hell on my girls and myself, due to the fact that she was a whore. A married guy twice her age was the target of another term I used. I informed them that I would seek a stop and desist if I heard from them once more. Additionally, I told my in-laws that they would not be able to visit my girls for some time to come. In a moment, I will explain why. I didn't remain for the meal, even though we were at a restaurant. In order for my lawyer to make sure CPS and any other organization working on the twins' welfare know that I will not be their guardian or be involved, I also wrote him an email. After that, I emailed my in-laws a list of all the usernames and websites of individuals who had offered to give interviews for the twins' adoption on Reddit, and here, even if it's really beautiful, I can't assist you if you're interested in the lads since I won't be involved any further. I stopped being involved yesterday. Before I went to visit the grandparents, I decided to talk to my daughters and get their opinions on why my in-laws won't let me see my girls. I thought it was terribly inappropriate for my youngest to refuse to talk to me. Then my oldest requested that we talk alone. At that point, she clarified that my in-laws had been ranting about the girls needing to prepare to attend public school rather than their private one, and to get employment as soon as they graduated from high school, because I would be responsible for paying for the twins' private education and college. It seems that they were also instructed to begin relocating their belongings in order to share a room. The twins require extra space, so my girls have their own rooms. I was unaware of this, mostly because it would never occur. It seems that because the newborns come first, my in-laws have been essentially bullying the daughters. Yes, it isn't taking place. I explained to the girls that their grandparents have no influence on their college finances, where they attend school, or how our home is organized. Additionally, while I acknowledge that they could benefit from a scholarship and a part-time job while in college, their tuition will still be covered. I advised them not to hold the infants responsible for the adults' ignorance. They informed me they understood, but for the time being they still don't want to talk to their brothers. That portion offers me optimism that they will overcome the situation for the time being. We are going to make some alterations to the house for the time being. I don't like it, and neither do the females. My husband's office space is still there. We will turn it into a game room for everyone. I want to remove a few photos of my spouse and place them in albums for the girls. All we want is to claim the house as our own. Regarding those who are curious as to why my daughters refuse to interact with their father. When my spouse took my girls to see the twins in the hospital, they were the ones who found out about the affair and told me. My children told me, even though Dad had begged them to keep it a secret. My spouse then started mistreating them as well. He ruined his relationship with the females. Since certain individuals continue to harass me in PMS, this is a very brief update. On Monday, I talked to a lawyer. Until a DNA test is conducted, the lads have no claim to inheritance. There are just allegations made against my in-laws after that. Since the joint account isn't regarded as my husband's personal property, I own it. The lake cottage is no different. The boys would only be able to collect his personal savings account and life insurance, which were given to his parents. If it goes to trial, this can obviously be modified. But the lawyer informed me that there is very little chance a court will seek our assets given how little my spouse left my daughters and myself. Additionally, the lawyer advised me to entirely stop discussing any money with the boys, since doing so may be used as evidence that I am accepting financial responsibility for them and should be regarded as their guardian. I'm allocating funds from the joint account to my daughter's college expenses. The daughters and I aren't connected to the lake house, but I'm still not sure if I'll sell it. Please stop talking to me about the boys' inheritance now. As unfortunate as it is, my spouse ruined everything for his kids. I don't have to give up my possessions to provide children a better life, and I'm not accountable for them. The second update. Both positive and unpleasant news are present. The boys will be placed in foster care until a permanent arrangement is arranged, but the good news is that CPS was able to securely collect them from their maternal grandparents. My mother and their grandparents came to yell at me at work, so I found out when it happened. To be honest, I'm relieved that this occurred at work rather than at home. Since I don't want my girls to see any of this, it has caused me to think of moving. Soon after, I received a call regarding my adoption and foster care inquiries, which was annoying. It seems that CPS received my information since I was interested in fostering the twins and then adopting them. The operator was first stunned when I detailed the circumstances between the grandparents and me. She expressed regret for the incident and promised to ensure that the procedure didn't annoy me. This morning, I was served as well. For the rights of grandparents, my in-laws are suing. They are suing for custody as well. It appears like they want to quit their assisted living facility, which is not something they should do, to purchase a home that will enable children to reclaim the twins and now want custody of my girls. I received instructions right away from my own attorney. I won't tell in order to protect my girls and myself from potential dangers in the event of a custody dispute. Both my attorney and I have a suspicion that my in-laws want the girls to have them look after the twins. Due of my in-laws' limited mobility, the likelihood of something occurring is extremely unlikely. I don't think CPS ever put the boys with them in the first place. It's not all negative news. Next week, I'm going to start treatment, and my oldest daughter is talking about universities once more. They still haven't agreed to visit their father's grave or have any meaningful conversations about him. I haven't been there myself, and I'm making a concerted effort to stop referring to him as my spouse. From what I've heard, his parents had the epitaph, "Devoted and beloved husband, father, and son," inscribed on it, but I had nothing to do with the burial arrangements other than paying the fees. It seems like a joke to me. I am aware that harboring so much resentment and rage is unhealthy. However, I want to alter his gravestone to exclude his father in marriage as soon as I get the time. It may sound trivial, but I won't praise an abuser and cheater simply because he's no longer alive. Both I and my girls deserved better. I also paid for everything in the end, in case anyone was upset about my altering the gravestone. So stop complaining. You are aware of the location. Until the whole situation with the grandparents is resolved, I doubt I'll publish another update. The lawsuit has been settled. To the good individuals who have helped me and my girls, thank you. Many thanks. I'm returning to my previous Reddit account for the time being, but perhaps I'll have good news soon. More details. Is it possible for you to temporarily house the twins, or till a family member can take over? Oopie. I'd rather not take them, even for a short time. I'm 45. I'm worn out. I have a full-time job. Babies are not something I have time for. I no longer even have a babysitter. After school, my daughters are old enough to stay at home by themselves until I get home from work. Babies are too young for me to do that. I can't ask them to watch them either. They like going out with friends and participate in after-school groups. I don't want them to have children. They're too much for me. I'm not even able to lift them up. I can't. But they're innocent. My girls would then travel to my cousin if it were the other way around. That was our fallback strategy from the beginning. If both my spouse and I passed away, I apologize for the twins' lack of that. However, as I read more about this, I've come to the conclusion that I can't support those infants' desire for her daughters to have a sibling bond with their half-brothers. I've tried, but they know what cheating is since they're adolescents. If they don't want to be in a connection with the baby, I won't push them. Daughter's therapy. About the affair and its fallout. Whoop. This was brought up with the therapist I had with my girls. The newborns are hated by the girls. I understand that it's not the baby's fault, but the girls are upset and making accusations. I don't want to cause them any more anxiety. Up on the inheritance, her husband's will left for the family. For the twin brothers, anything is okay. Oop! My name was left on the will and the properties. A lake cottage that is for sale is the sole common property. I will gladly split the will if it is challenged. I don't have to provide anything at this point since I know it wasn't 50-50. Due to his infidelity, I was left with the majority of our prenuptial assets after the divorce. That was half of his possessions. Prior to the marriage, I owned the family house. Along with the $25,000, the automobiles are being sold and donated to my daughter's college, and he owned part of that lake home. In accordance with his will, his parents received the amount from his personal bank account. According to the will, they have no assets. They may dispute partial ownership of a lake house, but it would be the only asset they would receive, the $25,000 I offered them. I apologize, but I won't say anything more. In both my marriage and the divorce, I made more money. The majority of the assets were going to me. My girls will soon be attending college. Although I feel bad for them, I refuse to let my daughter's life suffer. It's also brave of you to believe that my girls will fall in love with them. It is up to them whether or not they go to treatment, whether or not they choose to be involved in their half-brother's life in the future. No pressure from me. Although kids won't be compelled to view them as family, I hope they come to see them as innocent and learn not to despise them. As a lawyer, I'm rigorously adhering to the guidelines. My divorce attorney and the will's attorney agreed. I will not go beyond the letter of the law, as counsel has instructed. Inconsequential as well. My girls deserved a better father if I deserved a faithful husband. Only what the law requires will be given to the twins. Updated on October 3rd, 2024, 17th. Hello everyone. Since I didn't have anything until today to begin, several folks have been asking me for updates. The boys were adopted by cousins on my ex-husband's side of the family. They are beautiful, I know them, and I know they will provide the twins with a wonderful life. Talk to my girls and let them know if they ever wish to get in touch with their half-brothers. The new parents are named Matt and Kim. All they need to do is give a call. If not, they may just see them as distant relatives. Though they said they don't really want a sibling connection right now, my girls thanked them and said that perhaps it would work out because they are cousins. They told me not to worry since they don't need the money, but I did offer them the money from the pooled account because they are family. Kim even requested that I take my daughters and I on a trip with that money. I seem to resemble the living dead. My ex's parents are fair partners, and they also said some really harsh things about my in-laws. They won't be regarded as grandparents, but they can see the boys. Apparently, This led to a heated argument with the app's parents, Kim and Matt, then interrupted them once more. Grandparents' rights lawsuits were threatened, but nothing came of it. That's how I learned why the parents of the app were unable to adopt the boys for good. The father has a history of abuse and a felony conviction. If what Matt and Kim told me is accurate, I'm relieved the boys won't grow up with that man as an example, but I won't get into the specifics out of respect. His wife's attempt to guardianship was solely motivated by the parents' unexpected deaths and the search for a family member to raise the boys. In order to grant permanent custody, she would have needed to move away from her husband, but she refused to do so. After seeing that threats would not be effective, my ex-in-laws decided to become great uncles instead. Well done. Since they recently left assisted living and the facility where they were staying currently has no openings, I suppose they now want me to let them live with me and the daughters. They only got in initially because my ex and I volunteered to pay for 5 years in full, and this facility has a huge waiting. I was going to cover their remaining 2 full years of wages, following the ordeal they inflicted on me and my daughters. Instead of spending money on them, I would rather burn it in a barbecue. I am aware that they want me and my girls to look after them. I won't even think about it. In all honesty, I want to think about meeting someone new, but my girls have their own roots to follow. I've been trying to move on ever since I learnt about the affair, even if it may seem like I'm moving on too quickly. My ex doesn't deserve me to experience grief, in my opinion. I already lamented our connection. That's what my oldest daughter said anyhow. It's funny since she's been pushing me to meet new people. My ex-in-law's custody case is still pending, and there are a few more matters that I will discuss when I receive more information. However, I wanted to at least inform everyone that the boys are together and safe. OP responded to comments. The first commenter: "It seems like you and your daughter are incredibly well adjusted. I'm relieved that the boys have found safety and are still able to have a cordial familial relationship with their half-sisters. I believe that this event has beyond my highest hopes, and I am pleased for everyone, particularly the soon-to-be homeless who will no longer be living in their superior homes. They'll be all right since they should have enough money to buy a new property. Even if they could be terrible, I would spend the money to at least provide them with a reasonably decent place to live if they were to become homeless. However, what they do now is entirely up to them." The second commenter: "So why did your ex-in-laws vacate their prepaid lodging? Has your rent from the previous 2 years been reimbursed? That sum is substantial." OP: "Not at all. Since they were eager to complete their whole custody plan, they approved the money. I'm speaking with a lawyer to see if we can get the money back, but it's highly doubtful because my in-laws committed the breach. And yes, roughly $180K. Yes, I completely agree. My ex has a bad knee and is essentially blind. He can hardly move. Mill, my ex, has back problems. It is honestly hard for them to live alone wherever they travel, since they both have diabetes and other problems. A carer is essential. That's the reason my ex and I search for a quality facility. If they hadn't gotten my ex's life insurance and personal savings, I would have a sense of duty. However, provided they don't waste it, they have enough money from him to live well. Now, it's their fault if they waste it. Once more, the speculative situation would be if they had no money at all.